So as you might know by now, you can use Google Cloud Messaging to send notifications to iOS devices through APNS. Now, in a previous video, we shed a little light on how the APNS half of this combo works. Let's see if we can do the same thing for GCM on this episode of Route 85. So before we go any further, I'd recommend watching this video on understanding APNS if you haven't yet. If you have, here's a real quick review. When you send a notification through APNS, it requires two important pieces of information. First is the device token, which is basically an alias for the device you want to talk to. Remember, that's like the secret fake name rock stars leave at the hotel register so that their real friends can find them. Second is the APNS certificate, which basically contains a public key that you can use to communicate with APNS. Oh yeah, and there's the notification itself. So I guess that's three pieces of information. Now, sending notifications through GCM is similar, but not quite the same. Let's look at the two pieces of information you need to send a notification through GCM. First is the registration token. Like the APNS device token, it's the address of the device you want to talk to. Or I guess more accurately, it's the fake rockstar alias for the device you want to talk to. Now, GCM has its own token that it uses, but it turns out there are other services, not just cloud messaging, that could theoretically use this token as well. So while you'll often hear it referred to as a GCM registration token, its real name is an instance ID token. And when it gets down to implementing this thing for reals, you're going to see that you'll be using a library called the instance ID library to get one of these. Now, second is the API key. You don't need a certificate with its own private public key combination to communicate with GCM servers the way you do with APNS. Instead, you send across an API key that is unique to your application with every request that you make. This API key is generated by the console when you first set up your project and is what GCM uses to confirm that yes, you really are communicating on behalf of your application, which means this is something you want to treat with the same kind of sensitivity as, say, a password. Don't make it easy for people to discover. Don't put it in a public file on a server somewhere. And for crying out loud, don't ever put this on your client. So if we were using GCM to make a request to an Android device, it would look pretty similar to the APNS flow. Our server would talk to GCM using the API key as proof that yes, we're really who we say we are. Then we'd use the registration token to both find the right device to talk to as well as prove that yes, we really have the right to talk to this user because they gave us their rockstar alias. Add on the rest of our data, and our notification gets sent. Yay. But we're dealing with the iOS world where things are slightly different. GCM still needs to route all of its requests through APNS if we want to bring up any kind of notification in the background or anything. So before you ask GCM to create a registration token for you on iOS, you first need an APNS device token. Then you tell Google servers, hey, here's an APNS device token. Can you create a GCM registration token, associate it with this APNS token, and then send me a copy? This is probably inaccurate, but I like to think that when you're done, there's a database table out there somewhere that now has your GCM registration token, your APNS device token, and your sender ID all in a row. Now, also remember that GCM, like any other server, needs an APNS certificate to communicate with the APNS service. Yes, I know that's still redundant. Shut up. So at around the same time you register your application with GCM and you create your API key, you're also going to upload your APNS certificate to Google servers to tell it that this is the APNS certificate that it should associate with this GCM key. Again, probably inaccurate, but I like to think that in another database table somewhere, there's a row that's got your GCM API key, your APNS certificate, and your app sender ID all in a row. With me so far? Okay, cool. So let's review the entire end-to-end process of sending a notification to APNS through GCM, starting with the setup process. And yes, I did spend Google's money purchasing a stock photo image of an enchilada. So let's take a moment to admire it, shall we? All right, I'm getting hungry. So at some point when you're first building your app, you register with the APNS servers using iTunes Connect. You tell it about your app, your bundle ID, and you generate your APNS certificate. Then you go ahead and register that same app with GCM using the console. Now at this point, you're going to get back an API key, which you'll use to identify your app to GCM when you talk with it. Now at some point, quite possibly the same time you're creating this API key in the first place, you're also going to upload your APNS certificate to GCM servers. GCM then associates that certificate with the app that is identified by that API key that it just gave you. So now let's move on to the world of the client and what happens when it asks to receive some notifications. First off, your client will tell iOS, hey, I want to receive notifications. iOS will ask the user if that's okay. Now, if the user says yes, iOS registers your app with its servers and gets back an APNS device token, remember that's the fake Rockstar alias, that it shares with your app. Your app then needs to ping the Instance ID service, which for simplicity, and because I'm running out of room here, we'll pretend is a part of GCM, for its registration token. And as part of the request, it passes along the device token that it just got from APNS. The Instance ID service then returns a registration token, and that is the token you're going to use if you want to send a message to this target device. Okay, so registration's done. Let's see what happens when we now want to go ahead and send a notification. Now, in our scenario, let's assume you want to ping this individual device and you have a little bit of code on your server to do it. For that to work, the user's client will now need to send back this registration token to your server. How you do that is kind of up to you. So when you want to send a notification to this device, your servers are going to send off a notification request to the GCM servers. Now it's going to pass along the API key and the GCM token for this device along with that notification. GCM servers are going to verify that the API key and the registration token both exist on its servers, and it's going to make sure that they both correctly map to the same app. Assuming all that's good, it will then notice, hey, this registration token contains an entry for an APNS device token. That's its cue that our target device is actually an iOS device. So it'll grab that along with the Apns certificate associated with the API key and use those 2 bits to communicate to Apple's servers. It will then take your notification request, alter it a bit to fit Apple's notification format, and then send that notification request to APNS along with the device token that it found earlier. Apple will receive this information, confirm that everything looks correct on this end, and then send the notification along to the user's device. Hooray! Whew, all right, well that was an awful lot of work just to send one little notification, right? But don't worry too much. A lot of this work is setup stuff that you're only going to need to do once per app, and a lot of the other work really just gets taken care of automatically for you behind the scenes. Now granted, I haven't talked yet about things like upstream messaging, which is a whole other kettle of fish, or topic messaging, or some other edge cases, but I think for the purposes of getting started with GCM on iOS, this is probably everything you need. See, our giant black rectangle is now a lightish gray rectangle. So with this information under your belt, I suggest you now go and tackle the documentation if you haven't yet. It'll probably be a little easier to digest now that you have some background information. And be on the lookout for future episodes of Route 85. I'll see if I can tackle some of the nuts and bolts of this process in a screencast or two. Wouldn't that be nice? Yes, it would. But you're going to have to wait until after I.O. I'm busy.